Okay, I'll maybe just get started so that we don't run too late today, and quite a lot of my slides are pictures, so hopefully the little box won't interfere too much. So, good morning. There we go. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you and to the organisers for inviting me to speak this morning. And I've got my phone here because I'm very talkative, but I will promise not to speak for more than about 30 minutes this morning. And my title is Rare Conditions, What Are They and How Can Registries Improve Care? Now, I'm sure I don't need to tell many of you in the audience what a rare condition is, but I can give a very brief overview. So, over the next 30 minutes, I thought I'd tell you who I am, why I've been asked to speak this morning, what we mean when we talk about rare conditions, and then an organisation that I'm involved with called the Office for Rare Conditions, and we're based in the west of Scotland in Glasgow. My rare condition that I'm interested in, and the children and the babies that I look after, have a condition known as differences of sex development. Now, I won't spend too long speaking about that, but I guess today, when I'm describing a rare disease registry, this is the example I'll use, because I've been involved with these patients and their families for over 10 years, and I've been heavily involved in setting up an international registry for families whose children have differences of sex development. So that's why I've included that. And then I'll speak more broadly about rare disease registries, and we can touch briefly on the benefits and the challenges of rare disease registries. And of course, please ask me questions at any point through the talk. So who am I? I'm a neonatologist, so that means I'm a baby doctor, essentially. I look after babies from the newborn period, generally up until the age of about 28 days, but sometimes a bit longer than that. And it's a real privilege to do my job. I work in a very, very busy unit, and when you consider that about 1 in 17 of us has a rare condition, you'll see that I meet babies with rare conditions on a regular basis. So it's a real privilege to do my job. Not everyone with a rare condition is diagnosed at birth, but many babies are, and I'm lucky enough to work with these families on a day-to-day basis. This is my hospital. This is the largest hospital in Scotland, and we're very lucky because we have, if you like, 3 hospitals in one place. And I'm sure many of you are from countries that have a similar setup, but we are very lucky because this big star-shaped hospital is our adult hospital, and then this kind of oblong or circular-shaped building here is our children's hospital, and lastly, this last building here on the right is our maternity hospital. So we're very lucky in that we can care for pregnant mothers who are expecting their babies. We can look after them through their delivery. We then can look after their newborn babies. We then can transition those babies to the children's hospital for their care. And then when they reach the stage that many of you are at, sort of adolescence and teenage years, we can transition them over to the adult hospital. So I'm very lucky to work on this particular site, which is in the west of Scotland in Glasgow. And this here is just a picture of our neonatal unit. So as I mentioned, we're a very busy unit. We have over 6,000 deliveries every year, and we have over 2,500 admissions a year to our unit. So we're incredibly busy, and we're also the national centre in Scotland for cardiac problems, for ear, nose and throat problems, and for neurosurgical problems too. So we have lots of patients with varied problems, and you can see here this little incubator here. Under that green sheet there's a wee baby, and we tend to have about 6 babies in every room, and we have 50 cots, so we're spread over 2 sides. So that's who I am and what I do. And then moving on to rare conditions. So I became involved with families with rare conditions first about 10 to 15 years ago, and more recently I work for the Office for Rare Conditions in Glasgow, and I'm sure you all know these. I'm sure you've seen these definitions before. If not, you'll probably hear more about them as today goes on. But rare disease defines it as a life-threatening or chronically debilitating disease that affects 5 people or fewer in 1 in 10,000 and requires special combined efforts to enable patients to be treated effectively. And the European Commission have simplified that and said less than 1 in 2,000 people. And you may have heard figures before, but actually rare conditions are not that rare. 1 in 17 of us are affected, and we talk about being individually rare, but together very strong, because there is a large patient voice, particularly in Scotland. So what sort of numbers are we talking about in Scotland? About 300,000 people potentially affected in Scotland, and that translates to about 3.5 million in the UK, and 29 million in the European Union. So, although individually disease can be rare, together it's actually very common. When you look at websites like Orphanet, who try and very nicely define these conditions, you can see there's over 6,000 of them, and that new conditions are being discovered every single year. Many of them are genetic in origin, and over 3/4 of them present in children. And that's, I guess, where my real interest is, my real love, because it's children and babies that I see on a day-to-day basis. And sadly, some of these children don't survive beyond their 5th birthday. My centre, my hospital that I showed you the picture of, we see about 10,000 children a year with rare conditions. So again, it's not insignificant, the numbers that we see. So what have we done about this in Glasgow? We established at the beginning of last year a place called the Office for Rare Conditions. We received funding very generously from the Reid Timoney Foundation and the Glasgow Children's Hospital Charity and Kiowa Kieran, who are based in Galashiels, not far from here. And we work with our health board and our university based on that site, the picture that I showed you, to try and focus on common issues for patients and families affected by rare conditions. And although it's funded for 3 years, we're really hopeful that we'll get more funding and continue this work. So what do we do at the Office for Rare Conditions? Well, there's a lot. I could do a whole other talk about everything that goes on there. But we have divided it into kind of 3 main areas. Patient support. So we do a lot of information events. We host a lot of family events. We also organise information gathering, representation. So we have representation on the Scottish Government cross-party working group for the rare disease strategy. And we go along to clinics and we ask families and patients and parents, how are we doing and what can we do to make life better for you? Lots of education as well. We organise education days not just for healthcare professionals but also for families and children affected by rare conditions. And then, of course, research and clinical care. So we help to coordinate research on our site, and we play a major role in database and registry development, and I guess that's what I'm here to talk about today. And we're closely linked with several European reference networks, again based at our site, for endocrinology, so hormones and epilepsy are 2 of and bone, actually 3 reference networks that we have on our site. Another thing that we do that I'm very proud of is we have a patients advisory group, because of course that is the core of everything that we do. It may not have projected very well, but these are the members of our patient advisory group and the rare conditions that they represent. And we've got quite a nice social media presence on Facebook or Twitter. Again, just search for the Office for Rare Conditions in Glasgow and you'll find us. And again, this is some of the events that we've hosted and some of the tweets and things that we have on our Twitter page. So again, please do come along and like us or follow us. So I'll talk very, very quickly about differences of sex development. So I'll call that DSD for short, just because differences of sex development is a long term. And these are my patient group that I've been involved with very closely for many years. And it's any congenital condition in which development of your chromosomes, your genes, your gonads, so your reproductive organs like your ovaries and your testes, or your anatomy, so your womb, your ovaries, your penis, your testes, is atypical or unusual. They're very, very rare, these conditions, so actually, for the babies that I see, sometimes it's only 1 in every 4,500 births of babies that are affected. But it's very important to get the management of these conditions right. You can imagine they're very rare, they're very embarrassing, so not a lot of families like to come and talk about your reproductive organs. And because of that, over the years, there's not been a great deal of research, there's not been a great deal of information sharing, and in fact, patients were left feeling quite isolated and quite vulnerable and felt that care wasn't progressing forward and they weren't having a good patient journey. Please forgive me, it's a very, very busy slide, but the point of this slide is simply to show you how many different conditions fall under the DSD umbrella. So there's probably upwards of about 25 rare conditions there. So again, these families have rare conditions under the DSD umbrella, but incredibly rare. And I think the next slide shows some of the conditions and how rare they are, even just in Scotland. So if you're looking at something like gonadal dysgenesis, then it's only 1 in every 100,000 people. So it's very rare, it's not a common condition, and a lot of families haven't actually heard about it until their child is affected. So 10 years ago, I became involved in trying to set up a registry for these families because we felt we needed to pool our resources, we needed to look further than Scotland, we needed to look nationally, we needed to look internationally and try and design a way to improve care for these patients and to look at driving research studies and improving communication among healthcare professionals. So as far back in 2000, there were lots of local registries. So the top one, the map of Scotland, is the iCAN registry. So that was our own very small Scottish registry. The next one down was a German registry. I think it was in Lübeck, again, a very small local registry. London and Canada. So there were places around the world starting to collect information for our patient group who have a DSD. But you can see that there were real pockets and there was no real communication across the board. So in 2007, we submitted an application to the European Union, and they funded us through the Euro DSD programme to build a European registry, and that was just a great time for us. We invited all countries in Europe to come along to participate. We held annual meetings, and we really built a registry from scratch for these patients. And it went from strength to strength. We used to be called the Euro DSD registry, and then we had other countries, so Australia, America, Africa came along and said, look, we've heard about your registry, we really want to come on board and get involved, and we were delighted. So then going forward, we developed into the International DSD registry. So we are now a registry with over, I think it's nearly 4,000 patients now from all continents in the world and many, many countries in the world too. The international project was initially funded by the Medical Research Council, and going forward we've had further funding from the European Union, and we're now looking at making our registry self-sufficient, if you like. So we're asking some of the, not the developing countries, but the developed countries to pay fees if they want to use our registry so that we can improve our registry and it can run by itself in a cost-neutral basis so that we don't always have to be scrabbling around trying to find money to make the registry work. You can have a look, our website's freely available to have a look at and see kind of how we've developed it. This is, again, a very busy slide, and I'm sorry for that, but it's really just to show you that we've got over 3,000 patients in the registry. We've got countries as far as Brazil, Turkey, Morocco, Germany, Switzerland, Ukraine, Austria, Israel, Bulgaria, China. So, you know, anything is possible. It does take a lot of hard work, but you can make a nice registry that can improve your patient care. So I guess an important thing to talk about in registry development is, of course, patient consent, because you can't have a registry without involving patients and having patients' permission to include your information on that registry. And we've done a lot of work surrounding this. We have adult consent forms for parents. We have adolescent consent forms for children, I think 14 years and younger. And we have information for young children as well. And we've translated a lot of our consent forms into other languages. So again, on our website, you can see different languages. And we do require that every centre that uploads information has permission from their ethics board, their ethics team, in order to do that. We do not use patient identifiable information, and I think that has to be fundamental to any registry. So we don't put on patient names, addresses, we don't even put on your date of birth, because again, you all know in this day and age, people can hack, networks, people can hack the internet, so it's not a safe place to store patient information. So we certainly don't do anything like that, and we do have very, very rigorous security controls around our network, our registry, and how it's hosted. So I guess then you might move on from hearing about the registry and ask, well, what does it actually do? How does it help the patients? So we have several ways of improving patient care. The first is through research, and this is the first of, I think, about 5 pages of studies that have come about as a result of the international registry. So we have a very good scientific team who take proposals from all over the world. So, if someone gets in touch with us from China and says, we would like to do a study on patients who have gonadal dysgenesis, then we put it through a very rigorous process, and we give approval, and then they can have access to the data on the registry and can then produce studies. So, as I say, this is just a few. There is about 5 pages of work, of studies, looking at how to improve patient care and improve things for families. And again, we have another feature, which I think is very good for developing countries, where clinicians and healthcare professionals can talk to each other using the registry. So we have a lot of colleagues in Africa who, again, have never been faced with these rare conditions before, don't even have access to perhaps the testing that we're fortunate enough to have in the developed world. So we have a process through the registry where they can communicate and say, actually, can you help me? What should I do for this patient? What's the best idea? We also have patient access to the registry. So if you are a patient who is on the registry, then that record belongs to you. It doesn't belong to us, it doesn't belong to the server, it belongs to you. So as a patient, you can log on, you can view your record, you can check that the information that we hold about you is correct. And that's something that families have fed back to us, that they've really, they felt very useful and very empowering. They're in charge of their record, and they can also be signposted to perhaps support groups or to their own clinical team if they needed to. We work very closely with the European Union, and I guess Brexit is making me very sad because I don't want to be separated from our partners in Europe. As I mentioned before, DSD, if you like, is an endocrine condition. It falls under the sort of hormonal category. So we work very closely with the European Reference Network, the European Endocrine Reference Network, and they have launched a recent project called Eureka, which is looking at making rare disease registries uniform across all endocrine conditions. So it's not just a DSD registry, it becomes a fit-for-purpose registry for all kinds of rare conditions. And that is important because you can have too many registries. You can have registries about rare conditions in different countries, and it's important that we're all trying to work together and collaborate in the best way possible. So Eureka is looking at that, and it's a similar team to the team that created the International DSD Registry, but they're sitting down and they're talking about things like core principles. So you can imagine with any condition, there's some core information that you might like to collect about patients, diagnosis, subdiagnosis, age, weight, height. There's a lot of commonalities across all different conditions. And I guess it's important that we try and work in collaboration across not just Europe, but also the world. So again, I'm sorry this is a very busy slide, and I probably could talk just on this slide for 30 minutes, but I'm not going to, I promise. This is, again, just looking at other registries that are out there. So this is me moving away from my DSD area of clinical interest and just focusing on rare conditions and rare condition registries. Many of you will have heard of EuroCat, which was a European registry, which I think was initially run in Ireland. I think it started out in Belfast and then it moved to mainland Europe. And it's now been surpassed by a couple of European Union programmes called EpiRare, which is the European Platform for Rare Disease Registries, and also RD Connect. So RD Connect is headed up by Domenica Tarausco in Italy, and she has pulled together a fantastic directory of registries for different rare conditions. Orphanet as well, I'm sure that will be mentioned several times during this meeting, but they've recently, in May of this year, produced a report called Rare Disease Registries in Europe, and that's very nice. It pulls all the different conditions together and lets families have a look and see if there's a registry that is relevant to them and if it's something that they would like to be involved with. In England, so not here in Scotland, down south below the border, they have a National Congenital Anomaly and Rare Disease Registration Service. It's quite a mouthful to say. And that's quite a new enterprise as well. And they're also looking at collecting standardised information for all rare conditions, all babies who are born with congenital problems in England. And I'm pleased to say that finally in Scotland, we're working on a similar thing. And there's currently a bid with Scottish Government to try and set up a Scottish Congenital Anomaly or Rare Disease Registry as well. And I think that will be really nice. But again, we have to be careful that we're all working in collaboration and we're not all breaking away doing small things in small sites. So, I guess, hopefully, I've sold you to what the benefits of a registry can be. It allows collaboration. So, in a small country like Scotland, a patient may be the only person in that whole country who has a certain rare condition. So, if we look wider, if we move to Europe or the world, then hopefully you can find other families who have had a similar journey to you. Hopefully you can find other healthcare professionals who can give advice and support. Clinical research is always challenging to do, and I would say it's particularly challenging to do in children because children are very vulnerable and we have to protect our children. So again, to my mind, using a standardised, approved, ethically approved registry is a good way of setting up research rather than, just wandering around, I think I'll just start up a wee project here somewhere. It's much better to be done in a standardised, safe and ethical way. Quality improvement is something that I haven't really touched on, but again, we use our registry to make sure patients are receiving the best care. So are our patients seeing enough doctors? Are our patients seeing a nurse specialist? Are our patients seeing a psychologist, a geneticist? Are they receiving the appropriate care for their condition? So it's really nice that you can benchmark against other countries. You can see how other countries do it well and how can you learn from them. You can also use a registry to actually collect patient and parent reported outcomes. So the way we've designed our DSD registry is it's modular. So if our stakeholders, if our families come to us and say, well, actually, we'd like to know what the parents think or what the children think of their care, then we can easily develop a module that can be online and families can go on there and provide feedback, provide information to help us improve patient care. And then I've already touched on the patient access, and that's quite a new thing for us, and I'm quite a firm believer in that because we shouldn't be holding data about patients that patients don't have access to because it's you're the person and it's your information. So the challenges, and there are many challenges with registries. The first one is just simply making sure that you are meeting all the right people and including all the right people in your registry, and that in itself has been a real challenge for us, and we're hopefully getting better as we're meeting more people who have interest in registries. Consent is a big one. For our DSD registry, we take consent from the parents for the child to be on the registry until that child becomes an adolescent or an adult, and then we specifically recontact the child, provide them with information and ask their permission to go on the registry. So I think that's quite nice as well. Once you reach an age where you're sensible enough, it's you making the decision and not your parents on your behalf. Confidentiality is very important, and I've touched on that. You have to, if you're holding data like this, be comfortable that it's secure and that there's no patient identifiable information. And duplication is a real challenge. So you can imagine, for example, in Scotland, we might have a patient with a rare condition who signs up to a registry and we collect their data, and then they move to England, or perhaps they go to England for some of their treatment. And I'm sure in many of your countries you'll have patients who move around, and that can be challenging, but again we've got fairly robust procedure in place to try and avoid that. And funding. I believe a good registry needs a lot of money, a lot of funding. We've got full-time computer programmers, we've got full-time program managers, we've got full-time staff who are always available for any problems with the registry. So it doesn't come cheap, and that's always a challenge for us to try and find more money to keep things going. So I guess I'll finish up. I hope I've convinced you that registries for rare conditions can enhance research, improve the quality of patient care, help the patient voice to be heard, and increase the development of new drugs and therapies. Now, I haven't touched on new drugs and therapies today because that's really not my area of expertise, but I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about that as the day goes on. So thank you very much for your time.